This is episode 6.
Milestones.
Yes. This is episode 6 of Fiction Factory, even though we haven't seen all of them released yet, but we're going to do another one of these, and that was kind of the hope. So this is where we're at now. And we're going to be talking about milestones, IP, or improvement points in this case, and whatever the hell else kind of like strikes our brain since this has been coming along, and I just deeply wish to announce a bunch of junk that we've got going on because it's amazing. Because we have that quick start, which I'm staring at right now. it gets me giddy, dude. I'm talking like best Christmas gift ever. It's not even done yet, and I like it.
And then, it needs some editing, but the editing is also fun.
Yep. Yeah, I can't wait. So, all right, I know that. So Ken was originally the one that like brought up the whole idea of improvement points, and honestly, I can blather on about any part of this for any reason at any time. So, where does that leave you guys exactly? Like,
Well, I've always just kind of seen the improvements points and the milestones as the milestones are just class specific, and then the improvement points are skill specific. So it's just basically how are you going to flush out your character? Are you gonna dive deep into the archetype, which the milestones will explore, or with the improvement points, are you going to improve your character overall stats and skills? It's an interesting delineation between the two.
I've never thought about it that way. That is awesome.
Well, I mean, it's like
there you
Shadows
go.
is all about character building.
That is dead. That was 100% dead on, though. I have never thought about it that way. Holy crap!
Well, I mean, it's kind of a good thing that this is kind of the discussion point, right?
Yeah. Oh, we're getting questions.
Well, yeah, because Ken's wanting to throw it in there. He wants to catalyze this whole thing. Really, it's Ken's show.
Shadows, the tabletop RPG that is better than all other tabletop RPGs.
High praise for one that's not yet fully developed. Okay, maybe I should probably so retain the thought for just a second because I definitely want to like hone in on something real fast. So, tabletop role-playing game. It's in development. It is using a D10 system that we've been working on collectively for the last 3 years. Come April. See, that's the crazy part. Come April, it's 3 years over. And it has a lot of versatility, flexibility, etc. But the milestones and the advancement and how you go, how do you get to more being more badass is exactly what we're discussing. It's the mechanics therein. So that's the context I wanted to at least land it on.
Yeah. So I think probably the easiest way to talk about it is how it differs from other systems. So the system that I'm most familiar with, and I think I just shared a video with you about this, about experience versus milestone advancement in Dungeons and Dragons, right? The two major schools of thought that you should get incremental experience points every time you kill a goblin or solve a puzzle or defeat the boss or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you have to get 2,000 experience points to level up, and you're like carrying around a bag full of rats, just beating them against the wall and slowly leveling up. Right? Like that's
almost pretty much Japanese anime like standard now for like MMOs, isekai, anything else along those lines.
MMO style.
Yeah. In comparison, kind of to my prior point, the IP is like a fine tuning. So instead of a ding, hey, you leveled, it's a, all right, I really have been failing a lot of will checks lately. What can I do? And then you go to the character sheet, you take a look. That will is a combination of body, empathy, and intelligence. Oh, great. If I use this IP to bump up my intelligence by 1, then I'm going to bump up my will enough to be in an acceptable range. Yeah. Right? So IP has always been to me like a dialing down of the character to its most fundamental core. Now, Milestones is something that it's just something new for me because I've been playing the system for so long, and I've always dealt with IP. I love the Milestones. Again, repeating it to death is the class-specific archetype. How are you going to flush out your archetype? And that's self-explanatory, and that's something that D's been expanding as well. It's been pretty interesting. The vampire archetype milestones, they make a lot of sense. They really do.
Absolutely. They like help you uncover the lore behind the archetype in a big way.
And I think that's another aspect that should really be incorporated into the milestones is the fact that, you know, with the vampire archetype, it's really flushed out as to the rich history behind vampires culturally throughout the world, because each archetype represents a different cultural interpretation from history that was found. So I mean, that applied to werewolves, to mages, everything else allows you to have a fundamental greater understanding of the archetype as a whole. Think of it like a little treasure trove of gems. Like, oh, here's another aspect of their history, born out of the milestones themselves. But casual thoughts.
Well, and to be more to help identify / define what archetypes are. Anybody who's played any tabletop role playing games knows what a class is. It's kind of a typical, like, it's the standardized unit that is in almost any role playing game for the most part that uses mechanics as the foundation versus narrative. So, class being either a job or occupation or something that defines the character, it simplifies things. You know, D&D, they have fighters and sorcerers, warlocks, etc. They have net runners and solos and such like that in Cyberpunk 2020. You know, so that it's like each one of those things kind of helps to point the character in a direction. Archetypes are the same idea, but I refer to them as a soft class because they don't ultimately define everything about the character. It just says you get these kinds of attributes because you're playing this archetype, but you can branch off seamlessly into other things and kind of merge it around. So there's a lot that you just kind of like fits within that. So it can be a little confusing, but they just at least narrow down what you're going to be doing based on character concept, which is where, you know, having general milestones is going to be really important, because if you build something custom, you can go into that, or you can do what I figure is going to be completely legal in the sense is that if you create a custom archetype, you can basically pick from out of the milestones that are the closest adjacent in the system already. So whatever the closest adjacent archetype would be, you could probably steal from that while also using the generals. But it's because there has to be some versatility. But otherwise, you're just gonna let the GM do what they do if they're savvy enough. They just make up the milestones themselves based on everything they already see as a template. You know what I mean?
I think that's an important distinction that you just made as well, with milestones, like taking something adjacent, right? So the custom characters have always been my bag in the game, right? I love, I like creating new things that could potentially break the system.
You've tried.
Or they nearly break me. Cult personality.
Yeah. Well, that was just a load balancing issue. Literally, it was like you had personalities in your brain that just were like.
Yeah. Still recovering from that one.
30-page character sheet.
But that's more of the point, is the fact that having milestones, thinking of milestones in that type of thing makes it easier for people to create custom. Because one of the impressions I've gotten, well, in the initial thing when Drew and Scott were doing that, and then, you know, we had some initial reservations from Schroed initially about custom, which was it's so much. All right, we'll look at these milestones and see if anything tickles your fancy. Use these as guidelines. So it's the whole synergy thing. It's the how does the archetypes build up into the custom archetype? What's the synergy therein? And that really inherently lies in the milestones and milestone creation.
So let me go back a little bit in case someone has no idea what we're really talking about. So advancement in Shadows, there's no level up. There's no ding, you hit level 2, you hit level 3, whatever. There are incremental things that you get called improvement points or IP. And the way that we have been playing it, actually we've had 2 different flavors of distribution on that. We've had it where it's kind of a steady, you get 10 IP after every session. And then we've had it where, hey, you guys like defeated the mini boss, big thing, or you did hardcore Doom style leveling, going through the dungeon in Phobos. Here's like 30 IP for that turn, right? Like we've had those based on the GM's discretion, and then those improvement points are used to purchase enhancements to your stats or your skills, to advantages or to powers. And so an advantage might be something like having being well connected or being able to attack multiple times in a round. A power could be literally something like flight, regeneration, fangs, the ability to cast spells, things like that you can enhance with IP. And so, yeah, as Bill was saying, those are like this incremental kind of fill in the cracks between, and then you have these bigger steps, which are minor milestones. After each session, you get a milestone point, essentially. And when you've gotten 5 of those, like you've played in 5 sessions, you can use a minor milestone. The minor milestone is like a beefier version of IP. It's like 5 sessions of IP in one, right? You can bump up a stat point, you can add an advantage, you can get skill points, stuff like that. And then the major milestones, that's what Bill was talking about, where it's like real flavor and depth for your archetype. And those are things like, I'm looking at, for the Arcanist, something like etheric potency. You've learned to manipulate the ether to bring forth more power in your castings, gain +2 spell power per success while casting. Something like that. Has no prerequisites, really beefs up your casting when you're casting spells. Then you get something like Unburnable, which is like the big, gigantic, kind of end game milestone that basically says, no matter how badly you fail, you will never trigger, the big epic fails in spellcasting. You're never gonna rupture reality and mutate and all that stuff. But to get there, you have had to have played like 50 sessions. Like that's not, you can't power level that. That is sessions, not hours, not monsters.
And then there's the fun one for vampires, which is the one that I'm going to be pursuing, because I think we're on session 29 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I just hit 26. So yeah, I think you're 29. Yeah.
So the next round is my 3rd major milestone.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to be choosing, and I'm outright just going to say it now, I'm going to be choosing it's essentially a Daywalker trait. It allows the vampire to exist within the sunlight without going poof, and all crispy. Yeah. But the thing is, it requires 2 major milestones to have. So having it built in gives those checks and balances. And my camera's being interesting.
Oh yeah, Defiance of Soul.
Yep.
Ignore damage from
and
sunlight
here we go.
as though you were mortal again.
Sorry. Camera was just being meh.
Yeah, so but yeah, to earn a major milestone, that's 10 sessions, right? So if you're playing on a weekly basis, That's 10 weeks. That's 2.5 months before you can tap into that first major milestone. If you're playing multiple times a week, great. Like you'll get there faster, but you have put in the hours, you've put in the time. Um, it's not the same as like, well, we all killed the bad guy, so we all level up. I've played in 26 sessions. You've played in 29. Like, you should be further along from me. But unlike something like D&D, you being level 8 and me being level 6 is a game-breaking thing. Like, you're so far outside of each other's zones. But you being a few sessions ahead of me, like, that still works. We're still kind of relative power level.
Yeah, and
it should be rewarded.
That's the thing is, even though there's a separation between our two levels, again, to your point, it's the fact that I don't feel more overpowered than you. I feel like I have just a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, I mean, I skipped a week of class and you didn't, and you're more prepared for the test. Like,
right?
That makes sense.
Well, it was the what was it that made the movie Taken so brilliant, right? He wasn't the best there is. He isn't like some 80s action star that basically can shoot from the hip and hit dead point accuracy in the forehead, right? No, it's he was just a little bit better than the other guy, and that was the test of his skill. So that's how it kind of feels to me with the character progression, is that we're sometimes, because the system balances out, we're just a little bit better than the other guy.
Yeah, well, and I
or when
to scale
when
that.
your DM has put you into a cannon fodder scenario.
That was unintentional. I didn't realize that your natural armor was 14.
Let's just say it's amusing.
R.A.P.
Yeah.
Yeah, so D, kind of what was your inspiration? Because I haven't seen anything like this in this iteration. I haven't seen anything like this in other systems.
And Milestones, so like obviously the name or the title is not uncommon to tabletop role playing either, but the way it's used makes it different. The inspiration for me, I guess, see, that's the hard one. I don't know exactly where it came from, but it dawned on me that the one thing that really kind of comes of it, if we really wanted something that was like, felt like some kind of step ladder in advancement, because having the IP is the super organic method, but what our problem was, what kept coming up, was like, it's really great that this is organic. However, how do I know exactly how powerful something is in comparison to something else? Like, how do we really know what that is? And I was like, okay, well, there is a sense of advancement that you can kind of slap into it. Now, if I sit there and the milestones work in a similar fashion for your enemies as well. That was kind of like, how do we get a little bit of that step ladder sense of advancement involved that is something measured, right?
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. The enemies do get milestones.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like...
So you got to take them out.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, how do we do that? And it was like, well, I mean, the only thing that really operates in a static increment is the session itself. Every single time you get together to play, that counts as a single unit of gameplay. And, while that can change in variable, like, maybe you just do one scene, maybe you play for 18 hours, like, that part can go, bleh, 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 like, that changes all over the place. But you can affirmatively say, this was one session, or this was 2 sessions, or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, that's the one anchor point that I could see that was solid. Like, we can always count on that being, we're playing at least one session and we stopped here, then we played it again, and then, you can kind of do that. And I was like, what could we attach to that? Plus it's incentivizing to have something to show up like that, where it's like, cool, I can actually push my character forward on a specific build. Probably the best part about it to me was the feeling of, it's not contingent on like specifically like character action. It's dependent on just being present. That's That's literally it. If you show up and have a good time, you're rewarded. It's a freaking problem with that.
That teases a question that I have for you, Dee. What if IP can be as a measurement of time spent?
Well,
Think of it in the sense that, like, you earn 5 IP for every hour that you play.
You could do it that way if you wanted to. But the other thing, too, is that the IP delivered is kind of up to the GM in a sense, which is like, if you really want something to go a lot faster, like, I haven't given you guys, technically speaking, any IP for probably 6 or 7 sessions. It's been a while. Like, I don't even think you guys have even asked, which is hilarious. Which only means that whenever I go, okay, it's time to give you guys IP, it's going to be like a dump truck that just goes, and you're just going to get an ass load of IP whenever it pops over. Because it's going to be close to like 100, 150, somewhere in that range whenever I drop it. It's a lot. We've played a lot of games. We've gone through a lot of really weird situations. And I'm, like, overall, I am the arbiter of what I consider is the appropriate value. There's been systems that I've played where they try to give you experience based on, like, encounters and role play. Palladium in particular did this with Rifts. They actually had a table in there going, like, if the players encountered a fairly dangerous kind of combat situation, they get this much. If they used role playing, they did this much, and it would just go like that, and then you calculate that all up at the end of your session and be like, here you go, and it would be variable per person.
D&D used to give you 1 experience point per gold.
Oh god, yeah.
Of treasure that you
I
got.
forgot about that. They did, didn't they?
So you go you kill some orc and grab 200 treasure out of his coin purse, divide it among the party, and everyone gets 40 experience points.
I should remind Mike of this so that whenever we're playing next, I got over $5,000 in the last week's session, so I'm like, level up for me, please.
Right?
It's pay to play.
I found it back in our Discord chat.
Hey, look, the laws are still in the book, bud.
Yeah.
We can do this.
I went back through the archives to try and see, like, where did Milestones come from? So it was this very interesting thing that we were looking at trauma as a way of improving your character. So, and I think it's because
you get
Drew
bonuses for PTSD.
Yeah.
Like Drew was using, like, his character almost died, and he used it as like a story point. I'm gonna take on this disadvantage of what does he have? What did Ivar have? The, like, not cowardice, but like combat paralysis.
Yeah, it was combat paralysis, yeah. Meaning that he always went last every initiative order no matter what.
So he's like, I'm gonna take this on of combat paralysis because my character almost died because he was too slow to act or whatever. And that's like a story thing that he earned. I'm gonna take that on. But I'm gonna balance it by having Iron Will because I wouldn't give up. And now I'm gonna, succeed on a will save.
Yeah.
And so we were looking, or will check, the will save. So we were looking at that as, like, how can we use trauma to inform character development? And we literally, at one point, we called it, like, trauma points. and then Bill's like, they're kind of like story milestone markers. And then it was like, ooh, okay. Somewhere between storytelling and character development, this concept of synergy. This all came together in the same day, by the way. We decided to call it the synergy system the same day that we're having this conversation. So we must have had a really good session, like, the night before.
Something.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But we're like going through this thing, and then Bill says, storytelling milestones and shadows represent dynamic psychological stressors that Night City places on its denizens. Every 5 usages of IP, the DM and player will choose an advantage and a disadvantage to reflect events that have happened. And so we were looking at it that way, and then you said, I've got it. And you just, like, vomited all of these, like, milestone ideas out. So, like, we just, like, seeded the fertile soil in your brain. You, like, went to bed that night and came back and you were like, hey, guys. Bleh. And then, like, milestones showed up. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. This is October 2020. Then all of a
Jesus
sudden,
Christ. It's been
all this
3
stuff
years.
comes pouring out.
That was 3 years ago. That doesn't feel like 3 years ago. It also doesn't feel like it was a single conversation. That felt like, because what you're talking about rings a bell, but we're like, oh, that was like weeks of time. We were sitting there collaborating and putting it, apparently in one evening, though.
10/16/2020. Apparently at like 3 in the afternoon, we just sat around and shot the shit for like 2 hours and like brainstormed the game in the world building thread. Just like boom.
Yikes.
I forgot about trauma points. I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
Because that's just something that I think I've always done with my characters, and then you guys started doing with your characters. I mean, a Rod, he was like, D gave him, as the DM, gave him the disadvantage of one-armed.
Yeah.
Because he got his arm blown off by a rocket.
The missing limb. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the missing limb. And that's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember trauma points now.
Oh. Well, we had a great explanation for that, because normally your regeneration would just pop the new arm out. But the time you spent in the coffin has slowed your regenerative capacity so much, you just don't pop back like you used to.
I'm just an old feller.
Yeah, man.
Back in my day.
So, I think Milestones that is such a boost to the gameplay. It gives you something to look forward to, right? Like you're already planning out, this is what I'm going to get next. So it's very different from like, oh, I hit level 3. I guess I get now I can attack twice. Well, that's not what my character likes to do. Well, it doesn't matter. That's what your character gets at level 3. Like,
right.
Instead, you can say, like I'm, looking at the Arcanist, because my character is an Arcanist. I can go more into the like traveling dimensional gateways, portal type stuff, or I can go more into the like straight out damage. My spells never fail, or in the like I am a font of wisdom and knowledge. Like those are like 3 different. It's not my character, but those are like 3 different directions that I can go in over 20 different milestones. It's a lot of flexibility built in, and I can change directions halfway through.
Yeah,
right? It's not like a talent tree where like, oh, I spec'd into shields, now I can't go 2-weapon fighting.
Because you're defined by the evolution of the story.
Absolutely.
And that's the big thing, is you are so defined by the evolution of the story. What's going to make you who you are? Oh, well, this happened. Well, I'm gonna have to take this now.
Yeah, I mean, our motives have changed over the last 20 plus or 25 sessions. Like, and thinking of that, like 25 sessions at 1 a week, 30 sessions, right? We're at 30 sessions basically.
By this upcoming Thursday, will be 30. Yeah,
that's over 6 months of gameplay. Consistently, week in, week out, 6 months of gameplay. You've earned that higher level milestone.
Yeah.
And the ones I don't think any of the ones for vampire have skill requirements. But on the Arcanist, for example, like my occult skill has to be at a certain level. My spellcasting has to be at a certain level for me to take certain milestones. So I can't like dick around and not ever do any evocation and then be like, I'm gonna be an evocation master. Like that doesn't work. Yeah, but I have the points for it. No. Like you got to do the time and you got to get those prerequisites.
Yep, which is where the IP comes in, flooding into all of the different fractious elements that you need to take care of first, and that allows you to make those decisions. Yeah, it's all about the experience. Like, every single thing in here, I saw a YouTube video a little while back that was talking about something akin to this. I think it was actually about tabletop role-playing games, but it was actually about video games. And the same exact principle applies to video games too, because video games use mechanics to make things interesting. And the people that were doing it, If I can ever remember. Bill, do you remember the name of those two UK guys that usually do a lot of video game news? You and I both have watched them off and on. They've done reviews. I can't remember the name of them. But
Oh, the
yeah, it's the two guys with the glasses. One's Scottish, one's UK, I believe, or they're both Scottish, I think.
yeah.
Anyway,
Oh, I remember. Like,
yeah, if you figure it out, let me know. Because, like I said, we were watching that, but they've made their own video game, and they said we didn't do the video game based on the math, with these mechanics. We did the mechanics based on how they feel. Does this feel right for what we're trying to do? That's the exact same thing that's going on within the synergy system in Shadows. Does this serve the purpose of creating a certain feeling? It's the reason why there's essence checks. That's why they exist, because they give that sense of really pushing through something difficult. It's just the way that it works. Like, why do I have my combat the way that I do, where most every single roll is something contested somewhere, which I'm referring to now as either challenged or unchallenged. So if you have a challenged check, it means that somebody's actively trying to stop you, something or someone. An unchallenged,
my stealth versus your awareness.
Right. That is a challenged check. Period. That check is being challenged by an opponent. Something somewhere is actively trying to get in your way. Something that's unchallenged means that you're just going against something passive. Usually it just means you have to beat a number or something like that, and that's probably the least, out of all possible rolls, that's the least exciting. Like, just beating that, it has its own merit when things are high octane, but if you're challenged against the other person, the 2 points of randomness make it even more exciting. And then you add in the essence check, which goes further down that rabbit hole. You have an even greater area of possibility where the two of you are combating one another for whatever the goal is at a wider, broader range than you normally would get with any other kind of die roll, which makes it even more exciting. So that's the reason why these things exist. And if it doesn't feel good, if it's not possible, that goes right there with the milestones and everything else. Those are mechanics just the same. Milestones and IP need to feel like they're organic, that they allow you choices, and that you can make your character a badass. Because in the end, that's what we want. We want our characters to be badass. Through all the misery, suffering, and all the other stuff that goes on, we want them to kick ass. It's a mild power fantasy for everyone, to some degree. Maybe it's not flashy freaking shonen anime, but it doesn't have to be. If somebody's able to literally, bewitch a god in their game by outflanking them logically in some kind of discussion, that's pretty freaking badass. That should be an available option.
But you'd have to earn it.
Yes. You always have to earn it. You can't just be walking in there. No Deus, no Ex Machina, none of that stuff. That's all.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say what I like.
It's not going to save you now.
Yeah. We have we have a campaign power level, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if a new player were to come and join our game, they could go build a new character, or if one of our characters dies and we need to create a new character, right? Either way, we have a ground level.
Don't you wish that evil on me, Ricky Bobby?
I'm not. It's gonna be Danny. He's gonna blow himself up on accident. Like, he's gonna, let me help. Boom. But so we have that campaign power level, which informs your starting position. But
yeah,
if I were to go roll up a new character right now and insert them right into our campaign, they would be at session 0. Like, they don't get to come in. We've been playing for a few months, so you get to come in at 25 milestone points. Go pick up your stuff so that you're bounced out with us. No. This is the new person to the crew. They haven't put in that time. They haven't put in those hours. They might have more training or whatever before they came in to join us, but they don't get to start at that level. And so it gives you even more sense of the progression and ownership of your character, because you have slowly sculpted them to be exactly what you want. And I've never cared about leveling my character up more in a game than in this. Like, there's been character optimization. Definitely. I've played where I've agonized over which of these monk feats do I take that's going to let me do 12 attacks and the highest DPS or whatever. I have never thought about DPS, damage per round, attacks per minute, like any of that in Shadows.
Right.
It's been, well, let me see what feels good for the character, what makes sense for the character. Danny's not gonna like magically wake up one day and like know alchemy. Like he has to earn that in the game. He has to put in that time. He has to find someone to teach that to him. He has to develop that relationship, all that. Even though it might be a good power gaming move for me to know this certain spell or whatever, like you can't just like come up with it out of nowhere. And I think that stuff like the Milestones, stuff like IP really helps you to get there because it's steady drip.
Yeah.
That you can make plans, but you can still get surges like between the last 2 sessions through a nice timing of accumulating enough IP and having a minor milestone. I was able to level up like 3 different stats.
Yeah.
And that has a significant power boost for Danny, but that was lucky that it happened that way.
Well, and the way the costs work.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, and just like I was saying before, it's like your character's just a little bit better than the other guy.
Right.
Yeah. And that's sometimes just the edge you need in a gritty game like Shadows.
Yeah. Well, and it's got to be able to.
You just have to duck first.
Yeah, I mean, the avoidance of damage, I mean, there's a very big emphasis on that. Don't get hit, don't take damage. It's not really a smart plan. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't build a tank in this.
Lobby and 2 turrets just open fire on you.
Or go through one of our sessions and going, hey, I think we should have this advantage. What do you mean? Bullet dodge.
Right?
Oh, man. Well, so speaking of, like, you don't want to get hit or gritty games and the rest of it, I think Shadows tanks, whoever decides to go down that road to make a specifically tanky character, if we're talking about, like, if you could probably go down the vampire archetype, this is just me going on a tangent because I have to, it just sounded interesting because I've never thought about doing this until just now. But, like, if you wanted to make a tank, like, if you wanted to make him mortal, you would, like, invest an ass load into his body. You'd get, like, thick skin. You would get pain tolerance. You'd push everything in there to not suffer any penalties whatsoever from all of that other stuff. I mean, it's totally doable. But you're kind of
thick skull.
Yeah, yep, thick skull, so you don't get the crits on headshots. Yeah. Like, imagine being a tank in this. Like, you still suffer the damage, at least a little bit. But I mean, can you imagine what it would be like? Because the way that you have to explain it, because it's like nobody can take a 50 cal to the head and survive it. However, you can get grazed by it, and that makes more sense for how the damage works.
Yeah.
It's just like you just have to shift exactly how things went to make it more legible. But that's beside the point. I mean, a Shadows tank would be terrifying if they're
a superpower.
Right. They have all those things set aside. It's just like some normal dude, and they just, I mean, more or less, it's kind of like if I want to
make that.
It's like, it's basically playing Daredevil without the suit. He just keeps coming.
Yeah. Well, when you can make a tank for my campaign.
Okay.
Genetically modified grade A beef.
I think.
We'll call them like beef or slab.
Yeah, I mean, it's the stats again, like kids playing D&D, and it's like, well, where's the magnetism, right? Like, it's how come we don't have that? So I think that again, synergy. Yeah. It all works together. But yeah, I mean, I think because we don't have story-based advancement, and we don't have how many things did you kill based advancement. We have a different kind, and I think it really works.
It's character-driven advancement.
Yeah.
It is, who are you? And that's been the whole point of, or attraction, at least to me, for Shadows, is who are you? Who is
Well,
this character?
and you got to show up.
How is Night City going to literally shape your character?
How are you going to take your trauma and mold it into a weapon?
Right.
So my background, for anybody who's watching the VOD, is from our quick start guide. I screenshotted 2 of the pages from our quick start guide. So good luck zooming in and reading it. But we're really close to having the quick start guide ready. It doesn't have the full advancement and improvement process in it, because I think our idea with the quick start is that we'll be releasing it with pre-gens, and you're not going to run a full campaign off of just a quick start. So
I mean, if you're super diehard, you can make the stuff up yourself once you had some of the basic points. But yeah, like the whole.
If you're 10 sessions in, and you're like, hey, I really want to play this for real, like, then join us. Come, like,
yeah,
just
bring it on.
Time. We'll just jump in the session with us. But yeah, so the quick start guide is about 30 pages so far.
Mm-hmm.
Really close to finished. We've got the basics for how your stats work, how you can run the game, descriptions of skills and advantages and disadvantages, and then, like I said, the advancement part is in here. On this side here, we have some of the milestones, the major milestones that don't require any prerequisites. So, those are just good to go. You can pick them ad hoc. And then here are the minor milestones, which show how it works there. I feel like I'm doing the weather. And then here's the advancement table for how you spend your IP.
You just need to have the monitors to your left and right, so when you're looking this way, you can do the thing.
Yeah. So, I would encourage folks, check out our website, shadowsrpg.com. We'll have the quick start guide shared there when it's ready.
Yep, and I'm going to be pushing that onto Patreon, which I want to make an announcement in that site as well. We've been kind of dark. I want to go ahead and put that through. This will be the big drop, too.
Fortifying and getting ready for a big announcement. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, fortification. I'll take that as an explanation.
It's not that we haven't been busy.
No, we've been super busy. I know I've been, because I've been going through and trying to figure some stuff out, like those enhancement dice and things like that, like trying to find the right terminology, like the difference between challenged and unchallenged and all of that, to really make it this system in specific. I don't see a lot of systems using that terminology, so it'll help further distinguish it. Not a lot of people would think that's important, but it is, because people will be using it in general conversation across the table all the time, and so if it sounds like something, it'll just trigger that, and it's really important to actually be in the head. So how you say something or how you actually describe it's important. And then there's the I know those enhancement dice that I usually add on to professionals and stuff.
Throw on a 1d4, d6 or something.
Right, I'm calling those kickers. So if you get kicker dice, and it's something to get in your head, because I've already got it in the OneNote and I've got it sort of like laying it out. I'm just trying to throw this crap in. It's like little weird, stupid refinement stuff like this. That just kind of goes on in my brain. But those are kicker dice. And the other thing, too, about stunts that I want to put in eventually is that you should be, GMs should be able to give you a kicker, because you're doing something like, if it's a stunt that's badass enough, because if you remember way back in the day, I was like, hey, stunts are kind of the thing where you get rewarded for doing an awesome called shot. Let's see what you got, brother. And
Absolutely.
Right, which means that if you get awarded a kicker, there's a really important thing here. If you're not already using a kicker dice, it stops you from having a botch, because it's whatever the dice is plus your D10. So even if you roll the 1, it adds all together, so you never have a 1. Even when the kicker is there, you can't.
Like, here's the kicker.
Yeah, you can't break your leg on what it is you're doing by accident. It won't do it. You may not succeed, but you won't botch, and it will also tie into the kicker dice you already have. So if you have a professional and you do something really cool, again, this allows them to go toe-to-toe with supernatural beings when they normally wouldn't be able to. It's kind of like Lady Luck just kind of slips in and gives them that little edge and their skill is what allows them to do these things because they're so refined. So the system complements that. So if you already had a kicker of, a D6 for a specific skill, and you do something particularly badass, I'm like, yeah, throw yourself a D4 kicker, man. And you just do D4, D10, and D6, roll that group together and add it all up. You're going to have a lot better chance of succeeding. So shit like that, I want to start getting implemented, but I haven't had a chance to like meet up with you guys and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Let's make sure this is in there.
Well, and that could be a build that someone works toward.
Right.
Is a very, luck opportunity sort of thing where they're using favored weapons.
Here's the advantage.
Favored skills.
The advantage is called, here's the kicker.
There you go. Now, Dee, you had talked about, I know we're probably only going to go for a few minutes more, but you had talked about, so in this guide, I have Arcanist, Human, Vampire, and Werewolf.
Yeah.
And you had talked about general, creating a general major milestone group.
Yes.
Can you share any more about that, what that would look like?
So the general milestones will likely take on the areas where you don't normally get them anywhere else, or from specific archetypes. What it would look like
to powers and stuff.
Right, I would say a majority of them will probably end up looking skill-based because that's easiest. I do want to have like something that does an uptick to a power. It might wind up being, because if you notice with the minors, it's like skills, IP, the general milestones that are majors may just say increase a power by 1 rank with no IP cost.
Okay.
Like it just goes like that because it doesn't have a home, but you're increasing something that you might have, right? Because it just needs to take into those general variables and be like, here, just raise this up a notch. Or maybe if you're using something like kicker dice and you get a milestone that goes like, hey, if you have, if you normally have D4, D6, or what, it's like if you're using a kicker dice,
the size of your kicker
bounce
dice.
Bounce it up one die type instead of being where it was. So if you get a stunt going on and you have a D4 and I say, hey, throw yourself a D4, it's like, that's a D6, son of a bitch. Beep, like that. Something like that to kind of just give it edge, but it isn't tied to you specifically as the archetype you're playing. But it allows itself to kind of go everywhere. You can seed things over. But that's the general idea.
I like that, because I have thought on many, many times, like, oh, what class are you, or whatever, and I'm like, I'm just a dude. Like, you know, I'm just like, oh, you're clearly a ranger because you use a bow and arrow. I'm like, no, I hunt with a bow because I live in a farm and we raise some things and we hunt other things. But I'm not a ranger. I don't like live in the forest and like live that way of life. I'm like a villager who had to learn how to use a sword out of necessity. Why am I good at using a polearm? Well, because I used a walking stick to help, shepherd the sheep around. Like,
yeah,
I'm just a dude. And so something having like general milestones, like you're just good at being you better without having to go down like I'm a cyborg, I'm a mercenary, I'm a cleaner, I'm an arcanist. You're like, I'm a regular person in Night City who got thrust into this crazy world, but I'm really good at surviving.
Yeah, maybe you're just some sort of wacky programmer that really loves pistols and happen to have insane luck. Who knows?
I mean, those people exist in our world, so
yeah,
they definitely exist in...
Yeah, it's the whole idea was to break away from this concept that somehow or another you are, from the meta standpoint, genetically defined by your job. Like, that was the part that always kind of struck me as odd, is that you have your job, and there's a reason why in stories and fantasy that warriors have problems with advancing too hard, because they get thrust into politics. They get put into places where they don't do well, but they manage it, and they can still adapt based on what their background is to allow themselves to adapt into a new environment. It's possible. I know what they were going for, because in 2nd edition D&D, they pointed out a lot with, like, you're going to have a sword, you're going to train for it for... Right. Yeah. They had the proficiencies, and the way that they set them up was to allow you to get the idea that you specialized in these things because that's what you had the time to do. That's what these classes were meant to do. But they kind of, like, I don't know, sort of metastasized into these, you can't shift from out of this position no matter how hard you try. And that can feel like a serious lockdown. And this, it's like, okay, you get rewarded for specializing in certain areas, but you're also rewarded for branching out and trying to figure out other stuff. Because it's just like...
I think creating a brand new character can be intimidating. There are a lot of options.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you have a good character concept, you can figure out those mechanics later.
Yeah. Yep.
You can figure out how you get to your character goal later as you grow, which is fine because, you know, a 5-year-old kid doesn't need to know what career they want to have with that.
That's the interesting
right?
thing, actually playing at street level this time.
Yeah.
Playing at street level puts you into that headspace almost automatically.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, playing at the higher levels, you had like, well, how did I get here and everything else? But start at street level? No. I know how I got there. You know, that a couple times.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, unless you've got something that you've got either a lot of play history or you've done a damn good job of your character concept and conceptualizing what all the... It's basically the difference is you're playing the movie with a huge flashback or you're playing the movie from the start. Like...
Yeah.
And I am a firm fan that flashbacks have to be used minimalistically.
You're Tarantinoing it and just retconning yourself.
Oh my god.
Every few sessions. Don't you remember I did have a daughter who died in a firefight? Which is why I am good at protecting people now.
By the way, this tuna sandwich will be important about 5 acts later. You won't know why.
Yes.
But trust us, it's going to be important.
Okay, well, hopefully when Ken listens to this, we will have satisfied his urge to talk about improving on improvement points. I know Ken's urges are hard to satisfy, but
I mean,
here we go with the phrasing again.
And his needs. And hopefully our listeners, our viewers, you understand a little bit more about IP and milestones and why we get excited at the end of sessions sometimes when we have this revelation that something will change for our character off camera.
Yeah, well, shit, I want to have more people jump in and join in on top of that.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the reason why we've got... As a matter of fact, it just hit me. This is another one of those, like, brainiac moments. What I need to do is throw IP into a possible reward for viewer reward so that we get... Like, if somebody's watching the session, they're like, that was really awesome. Can we give player such and such amount of IP based, you know, can we do this? And they can spend an amount of IP that's like...
They can spend
equivalent.
their IP as a viewer to give us IP as a
Right.
character.
Like, if they might be like 100 per point or something, they're like, sweet, I want to give him 5 IP because he did something really awesome. 500 IP in the chat, and that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, then you get to keep your glasses on longer.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. I do need to diversify.
As long as Ken can't give himself, just spend it on himself and be like, well, he was going to get 400 IP right now.
I'm waiting for the day whenever Ken drops the bombshell that he's got 50 billion IP and he's just sort of like, hey, let's throw some legendary encounters at us for no reason.
And D will be blind and...
Right, I'll be blind, unable to speak. I'll have to type everything out. The music will rage, and I'll just be screaming in impotence at the screen.
Love it. Welcome to Shadows, everybody.
Oh, crap. Yeah, so check us out on shadowsrpg.com or at getdangerous.net. And we're going to be all over that.
GetDangerous.net is looking amazing.
Yeah, and we're also on Patreon as well. We're going to be pushing this stuff forward, man. Big drops coming. This year's going to be huge. And then we're going to have something absolutely playable that we can test, and that's the plan. So, yeah, for everybody who's watched, thank you so much. We'll be back around. Yes, indeed. Thanks for that.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.